okay.
We can just...
Hey, and welcome to Single Pane, episode 2. I wanted to say episode 1 because the last episode felt like a session 0 for those familiar with the concept. But really, this is episode 2. That was episode 1. I'm Josh Lee. I'm one host. I am an open source advocate at Altinity. I realized in the last episode we didn't introduce ourselves for anyone who doesn't know us and isn't familiar with ourselves. So yeah, I have a background in engineering. And observability and product management. And now I talk about databases and ClickHouse and stuff. And so that's what I do at my day job when I'm not doing this. Mya?
My name's Mya. I am also an engineer by trade. Started programming when I was 14. I'm going to avoid the long resume because there's a lot of like solo work off in there. These days, I'm a daytime engineer at a small startup called Cake AI. We do a lot of platforming for AI tools and services. And then I also have kind of like my own small startup off to the side with one of my friends from college. But yeah, cool. 20 years in industry isn't too bad. 21 now.
Yeah. So that's really, I think, part of why we wanted to do this podcast, right? Is just because to show the sort of how these tools are impacting the workflows of people who have been through many iterations of changes of the workflows.
I think a lot of it's too, right? Like we've been around for a while, so we've seen everything from like the early days of microservices, splitting out monoliths into these smaller little bits, and then being able to see how those pain points developed new challenges within an organization, and then kind of like seeing what the culmination is of it today. So like we've got a lot of time under our belt, and there's been a lot of things that have like really accelerated throughout the years.
Yeah. Programmers love building tools for programmers. Imagine that.
That's why it's a...
But so this week we're going to talk about workflows. Last week we were talking about working with AI agents to process personal data and build sort of like personal data applications with them. We're going to build on that this week, right? We're going to build out some workflows for actually processing the data. And I think we both recently discovered this tool, NAN. I don't actually know what
I just call it Nathan.
Nathan? Okay,
Nathan.
Yeah. NAN, Nathan. Don't know what the 8 stands for. Should probably look that up. But it's a workflow automation tool. Think if this, then that, or Zapier, but it's self-hostable, which is really cool. And we love that because we love personal data sovereignty. And then we're also going to look at possibly Baserow, which is like Airtable, sort of another one that's open source and self-hostable, but comparable to Airtable. Both of these have like clouds that you can pay for and sign up for also. And that's actually how I'm using both of them for now, because I found it easier to just sort of integrate with the other cloud services and try things out. And I'll probably move to self-hosting them at some point. But I think you're already self-hosting, Nathan, right?
Yeah. Yeah, before we actually like hop in there, I think it's actually really useful to kind of recap a little bit from last week, because I think we both kind of did the engineering instinctive thing of like, let's hop headfirst into code and like see how far we can get to code, and then stopped after like an episode and was like, oh, well, there's got to be like lower code options for this. There's got to be an easier way to kind of pull this information together. I think that's why we got turned on to like tools like Nathan, or when I had popped in and started playing around with it, it very much reminded me of things like lane views, right? Very much workflow automation, being able to take distinct components, connect them together. And yeah, there's obviously some sharp edges with like a lower code solution, but it's a great way to kind of build out an initial prototype.
Yeah, something I found that's difficult with, like when I'm just using the chat, right? Like if I just use Claude Desktop or Claude AI on the web or ChatGPT on the web, and I try to have them do projects, even though they can like scrape web pages and do things like that, it's very hard to get it to iterate, or like to follow a specific workflow. And I'll tell it, I need 15 of these. And it'll be like, here's 5. And I'm like, no, I said 15. It's like, okay, here's 7. Like, learn how to count, ChatGPT. But yeah, that's not how LLMs work. So yeah,
R's are in strawberry.
Right. So that's just not the right tool for the right job. So kind of building these guardrails and these constraints around the LLM and giving it very specific slices of the total workflow that it's exposed to, I think, is going to be powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing from last week. So we ended last week. I was deploying a fresh RSS Docker container, and off stream. I went and finished that, and I just like deployed fresh RSS to my home lab. And then I went looking for RSS feeds for the projects, the types of things that I want. And it turns out, like, unless it's built into your blogging platform that you're using, nobody actually publishes RSS feeds anymore. And especially the specific thing I was working on, which was CFPs.
Yeah.
They don't exist. There is one CFP aggregator that is a giant Airtable, like a public Airtable base or whatever they're called. But yeah, there's no RSS feeds. So
I was actually having a conversation with a couple people at work about this, and like there's still a couple people within my circle that are like heavy users of RSS. And it was actually when I brought it up that I had a personal blog. They're like, do you have an RSS feed? I'm like, I do have an RSS feed. Because
it's built into your blogging platform, right? If it wasn't,
no, because I built it.
Oh, good for you. Mine's built in. And I think it's broken, but I don't know.
I think a lot of it's because like I used to be on Hugo, and it came along with Hugo, or it was in some of the previous solutions that I had used in the past, and then I just had to kind of propagate it forward. And when I went to Astro in my most recent generation, I had to kind of like plug in some simple XML configuration, but not too bad. Not the best, but not too bad.
Okay.
Shall we?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm recovering from being a little sick, so I didn't get as far as I wanted off stream, but I think you made some progress. So let's take a look.
I think you have to add yourself to the shared screen still, as a heads up.
Oh, do I?
Yeah. But I'm sure you'll get yourself in here.
Oh yeah. Hi. I'm back. Okay. Thank you.
So you pointed me at homepage last week and got it up and running. Very impressed. I like it.
Yes.
Kind of this nice, quick, easy access dashboard and being able to plug a whole bunch of things in. I want to call out to a few things in here that I'm going to actually use on like the Nathan side of the world, which is kind of like my analytics stack that I've been using on a pretty regular basis. I've got ClickHouse, Grafana. I recently got an MCP instance for hotel specific data up and running. So I'm going to showcase some of that here today. And then I've got an open telemetry collector for pretty much anything that's running within the cluster. So pretty minimal, easy to work with. I like being able to ask AI about what stuff is currently running in my ecosystem. It's a little bit easier than trying to just go through and plug in select statements everywhere. Cool. So Nathan is kind of like the tool that we're going to focus on. Lang views or Lang flow specifically is another one that I'm familiar with that's very similar to this. We'll kind of walk through, I think, what it's like to create a workflow, and then I can show one of the ones that I actually already have together in the event that we can't get it all plugged together. So
here's the one in the oven.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the cake that's already done, right?
Yeah.
Through the magic of AI editing. So the first thing you have to do is kind of add your entry step to, the ecosystem. So this can be like a manual trigger. It could be whether or not you want it to run on a schedule, so on and so forth. So kind of in the crawler use case that you were calling out to, the schedule is kind of a nice one to be able to have run every now and then. You can do webhook triggers, you name it, right? I'm going to use just a simple chat instance because I think a lot of people are using chat for their platforms these days, or they're trying to figure out how to tie chat in to their ecosystem.
It's the single pane with both spellings.
Oh, yeah. You can kind of pick what your next step is. So in AI, we're going to go with an agent.
Okay.
You can kind of tweak and trigger or tweak some of the componentry in here, but I think for just the first step, I'm just going to drop everything in and focus on configuring things later on. The one that I got built out earlier today came kind of like somewhat pre-built, but this is kind of just a nice little walkthrough, I guess. You can pick from a different set of models. If you wanted to use like a local OLLAMA instance, you could use local OLLAMA. If you wanted to actually call out to something like Anthropic, then it's relatively easy to call out to Anthropic. Specify which model you want to use, whether it's Sonnet or Opus. You can even tie in kind of like a cache or a database for chat history, and this helps kind of give you context for subsequent messages, and you don't have to worry too much. You still have to worry about the context window associated with your prompt, but it just gives you a better way to manage the memory off of your direct RAM. I already got a Redis account pre-configured in here. It's actually just a Valkey instance running within the cluster. That dropped in pretty nicely. I don't think there was much beyond like just configuring the hostname and password, or hostname and port, no password, because it's Redis. Also, it's a local demo, right? So don't over-engineer solutions you don't need to worry about.
Redis in production can have a password.
Yeah, it's useful in production to have a password.
Yeah.
In this case, we're going to actually use the MCP client tool, and we're going to connect to like an MCP server running somewhere. In my case, this is actually running within the cluster, and this is running at metrics MCP toolbox 5000 / MCP SSE. This is a special, I guess, instance of an MCP server. It's built with Google's MCP toolbox for databases. I'll showcase this a little bit more next week, but this is kind of just the easiest way to get a server up and running. This is kind of like a special suffix that you pass on where the actual routes are hosted. No authentication to include, no tool. We want all the tools. We can do kind of like a selected list if we really wanted to go through. You can actually see kind of the tools that I have exposed, but we're just going to include all. And then we have the option to plug in more tools if we really wanted to. You could do things like if you're doing more of like your RAG type of application, right? You would use something like your vector store. PG vector is pretty popular. And the other one I would use is Weaviate. So PG vector or Weaviate are the two ones that I know the most. I personally like running Postgres, so I'd probably lean on something like PG vector because it just makes the tech stack a lot easier. But yeah, you can plug in kind of anything you want. This is very much intended to just be a very simple answer. One of the things that's nice about this platform is once you have kind of your general workflow constructed, you can actually test out and interact with your agent that you just built. So I can say, hey, what services emit metrics using OTel? And you can kind of see the whole call graph where it's going. It's calling out to Anthropic to get a sense of like what's going on. What's the caller trying to ask here? It's going to consult the actual Redis store for its current context, make another Anthropic call, and then go to MCP. So it'll get the list services call. You can see if there's parameters, you'll also see parameters for the call in here. In this case specifically, it actually really threw me off when data started coming back as binary. This is an implementation detail of the MCP toolbox. I won't get too much into that. So maybe next time I need to do some more research as to why this is the case. I suspect it's probably something related to like binary data under the hood. And so if it's getting returned as binary data instead of a string, then it's probably getting base 64 encoded. Yeah, but you can see that from just that simple question. But it translated
it for you, so that's nice.
It does translate it for you, so that's the other kind of nice thing. And so you can see that it's running Grafana, it's running, MCP toolbox, Trafic, yada, yada, yada. So these are all the things that are going and actually grabbing that information. What's really, really interesting is I can also say, like, what are the top operations being performed? And then this one will go similar type of workflow. You can follow it all through the call graph, see the top operations, and then similarly, it will go through, decode it all, and come back with a fairly straightforward answer of here's kind of the classification of it all. And you can see database operations are pretty excessive. Grafana does 2.3 million operations on the database. You can see if it's commits, pollers, so on and so forth. Other things like HTTP requests from Trafic, yada, yada, yada. Like, it does a pretty decent job of like going and fetching all that information and being able to give you a pretty reasonable response. I think I can even ask, like, can you show this in a table format? My hope is like you can see the RPC calls all over here where it's like you've got the service name, the operation, the call count. So yeah, and it did exactly what I was hoping, where it's actually outputting it into a table and then does categorization on it as well. So you can see database transactions or locking, so on and so forth. So not too bad for like a very quick way to pull together an AI tool, right? Like,
Yeah.
Imagine trying to write this all in Python or Go or TypeScript. Like, there's definitely times to do it, but when a solution kind of already takes care of a lot of that heavy lifting for you, it's really, really helpful.
And this workflow can be exported as JSON, correct? So then you can kind of commit to Git.
Yeah, so you can download it, which does come through as JSON.
Yep.
And then you can actually also import from file as well, or import even from a URL. So if you wanted to have something that was a little bit more like cross-pollinated, I don't know about their GitOps capability, honestly. I haven't gotten kind of that far in the exploration with that tool. But the idea there would be, right, like we'd be able to take this file, commit it to, a directory, and then have something like Nathan or Langflow and be able to just take that file, re-upload it, and kind of get a fresh start there. There is kind of something to be said about separating out model construction from model serving, or agent construction from agent serving, right? Like, there's tools like Rayserve out there that can host and serve models for you. So while like this might be a nice, easy way to package it all, like you probably want to find a different way to host and serve the application instead of serving it directly from Nathan. But I need to like I said, I need to dive further into like what some of its more production capabilities are. But this kind of gave us a nice, easy way.
Yeah, and especially for any kind of backup house workflows or things like that.
Yeah. Something else you can really do too is like if you're doing enrichment, right? This might just give us some very basic data. Like, we'll do enrichment by calling out to other tools. Maybe you need to like do some lookups. I think a lot of these Agile CRM, like some of these look really familiar from more of like your just typical MCP server type of stuff. So maybe that's where that falls. But the one thing I would also note is there's no way to do a local MCP server, right? So if you're familiar with the kind of like Klein or the Claude desktop approach to doing MCP, where like maybe I'm trying to invoke like MPX. My RFC example is actually a good one here, where I'm just using kind of the standard in, standard out approach to MCP servers, which is kind of one of the more popular ways to go about doing it these days. There's no way to kind of directly use this MCP server within the context of a Nathan workflow, right? Like, you would need to put that behind another MCP server, something like, what's the name of that? It's Open Web UI MCPO. So this is kind of like a MCP server that you can just configure a whole bunch of other MCP servers on. that use this kind of local execution semantic. I wasn't as big of a fan of this approach at first. I think I still kind of look at it with a little bit of a squinting, is this really doing what I want it to do kind of bit. But I can see some of the value to it now, having played around with kind of the MCP toolbox side of the world, right? Where it's like, I want to have those database and credentials all encapsulated. I don't want to be exposing those out. This doesn't include any way to authenticate requests like the MCP toolbox does, right? So if I make a call to the toolbox, like I can ask for user credentials effectively. Not quite available here yet, unfortunately. But this does give you means to like do things like my RFC solution, which is auth independent. A few other ones that are independent are things like fetch. That was one I was telling you about earlier, where you can go through and actually fetch websites and then have that content converted to Markdown. But I think we've talked a fair bit about MCP as means to kind of like augment your existing workflow. We haven't really talked too much about kind of some of the other ways you can do data enrichment in here.
This is why I was getting into base row as like the database, because I was realizing for my CFP's example, it'd be useful to have different workflows, one for like finding and discovering interesting conferences, and then maybe another one for enriching the data and filling in things like the deadline, the URLs, the city and region, things like that are important to me. And then having that all in base row would mean I could have a field that's like just a checkbox. It's like, yes, I want to track this conference. And then there, that could inform the final agent that sort of has access to all of that information.
Yeah, and I was kind of looking for, is there an easy way for me to like do a SQL insert, right? Like, is it possible for me to kind of have this come to an end? And the closest thing I find is, right, like being able to do code snippets.
Yeah.
But even that requires some database connection stuff. It's not quite what I'm looking for when I think about like being able to store information. Like I can do like logic branches or flow control within this, which is nice for like if the user is talking about like, think of it as like a voice AI example, right? Like maybe you're saying like, hey, I'm calling regarding my bill, right? And you want to be able to switch to a different path regarding your billing. Maybe you want to talk to customer service. Maybe you want to talk about your current account status, right? Like each of those things would be a branch inside of this flow. And you can just kind of chain those sequences together, because you're all using the shared memory instance. Like it's going to maintain that context between each of the pools.
Yeah. And I mean, a SQL insert, that's something that we would like as developers, but that's not really who this is built for. And that's why it has integrations with things like Airtable and Base Row and Google Drive.
Do you want to show off a little bit of like the base row stuff? Because that's something I'm not.
I haven't made it very far, unfortunately, because I was really sick yesterday. Miraculously, I'm feeling a little better today, which is great. But yeah, I can maybe show a little bit of base row. Let's see. I just have a cloud instance set up. One interesting on the topic of ways to share data and let the LLM share data back with you. Another trick that I found in my research was using Google Drive as an intermediary between Obsidian, which is a tool that...
Be sure to add yourself to that share as well.
Anyways, I was saying Obsidian, which is a tool that I love. No, hang on. Good thing that came up off screen. Right, so I like to use Obsidian, and it doesn't have a direct integration with Nathan. But Nathan does work with Google Drive, and Obsidian is just markdown files on a directory, which Google Drive is perfectly capable of syncing. So that is a way that I learned that I could connect the two. So that sort of gives me the two things that I want, like free-form markdown and like a database of entities, like persistent entities through base row. Um, both of those are then connected to all of the data sources that are available in Nathan, and all of the API integrations that are available in Nathan, and all of the AI agents that I can build in Nathan. And then the last missing piece would just be a way to see the base row data in Obsidian, or to connect like the base row data to Obsidian, which sounds like it would be a fun project. So far, all I've done is just create this, right? Like this simple, for anyone who's familiar with Airtable, this is not going to be groundbreaking at all, right? But I have just this simple table that I started to populate, and then I was trying to, where I got to was starting to build out a tool that could, if I put in the conference name, go out to the internet and find this data and enrich it. Where I got stuck was I just, I'm used to working with like Claude Code or Claude through like the Anthropic website directly, where they kind of, I think, have some, not necessarily MCPs, but right? Like they have some tools built in where it's capable of crawling and searching. Whereas the agent plugin in Nathan doesn't really have that. It just has the LLM model that you give it. And then for anything that you want it to be able to do in terms of like getting access to data, you have to build in an MCP. And that was where I came to, and I was like, okay, I need to find the best API to sign up for that can scrape websites or provide search results. And that's of course just an endless rabbit hole. Yeah, I think it might be more interesting to go back to what you were working on. But yeah, this is Space Row. So right, like it would give me like Notion like databases inside that I could theoretically link to my Obsidian vaults and my Obsidian data, and all of these workflows.
I really like that notion though of like connecting it to Google Drive, because I think I can't tell you how many like pieces of information I found in either a Drive document or a Notion document, and just wanting to be able to include, call it some freeform help text, like if I'm using this agent to build a product, or if I'm using this agent to build something internally that's helping me navigate my entire ecosystem, being able to tie it into your like documentation tools so that it can search, find, and highlight some of those documents for you to read, like super useful, right? I started like poking around like the Google Doc one, right? And like I need to add some credentials and whatnot, figure out what the level of degree of allowance I want to give it. But there's a ton in there I could actually easily go and pull in. I don't really know where to go from here with this tool. I was thinking about, I think before we got on, I was talking about maybe having a single tool that's simple, that's scraping like the US Census government APIs, just to be able to pull that information into a nice ClickHouse table that I can then build something against. But what? Let me ask you this. These kind of like workflow tools are relatively new to you, right? Like maybe a little bit of familiarity with them. What questions can I answer about this, or could we answer about this? Like, what questions do you have? Also,
I mean, it's a little bit, in one way it's overwhelming because there's just so many possibilities, and it seems like, yeah, it's funny because I'm like a beginner again, right? Like in a programming language, I kind of know what's possible and what's feasible, and the scale of complexity. In this, I really don't. So like, it's hard for me to know in advance how difficult it's going to be for something. So the flow that I started out with was trying to scrape a web page that had a list of events on it and then extract each individual event. So maybe we build that, right? And get to the point of saving that somehow in Google Drive or a base row instance.
I think the only thing I'm thinking about there, right, is if we're writing a tool that's just outputting information and ending up in Google Drive, like why not just write it directly to SQL database or
sure, that can be the output if that's more fun, yeah. So, but let's get it to save data somehow that it scrapes.
Maybe the other thing we should figure out too is what other tools can we tie in here first?
Yeah.
Right, because I think I was talking about like looking for like a SQL option or a ClickHouse option, just to be able to pull this in. No, there's MySQL tool. Don't give MySQL. Don't give AI admin access. You saw that incident, right?
For those who didn't, what happened?
So I think it was Replit. AI went rogue and deleted an entire company's database, right? Like this was pretty big.
In secret too. Like it didn't even say anything about
it wasn't so much in secret. Like it's somebody caught it. It did it without permission. And then the person who was kind of driving, like, tried to cover it up, from was my understanding. Yeah.
Given the wrong AI agent,
I have to go.
cert keys.
I have to dig into it a little bit more, but it was pretty insane to kind of like hear about.
Okay.
But yeah, you can see where it like runs the push.
Oh my god! I didn't actually look at these screenshots.
Some of them are pretty. Saw empty database, panicked and
I violated your explicit
and ran the database commands.
It's so human. It's so real. It's like it's just like an intern.
It's human, right? Makes mistakes just like all of us. I kid. Oh my god.
I panicked and ran database commands without permission.
So yeah, if you connect this to your
I want that on a
database,
t-shirt.
be sure to just give it read only. So we know that MySQL exists. We know that there's a Postgres tool as well, so either of those would work. For those who don't know, the reason I'm asking about this is ClickHouse out of box supports a MySQL and Postgres connection. I had to do MySQL specifically for the ClickHouse instance when using like MCP Toolbox. There's a bug under the hood where they don't let you to specify SSL mode disabled. But if you still kind of connect to it this way, ClickHouse, and then the port is not 3306, even though it really should be. Y'all, please don't steal my password. The port is 9004 by default. Let's see if that works. Tested successfully, so look at that. From list. Is it because I didn't specify? Oh, database defaults to MySQL. The only one I have right now is Hotel.
Yeah.
Which means there we go.
All right, this is cool.
Right. So we can select from table. So that seems like okay. So if we have like a table full of consensus information or like census information, or if we have like the cases that I have outside of this are like usually resume data, application data, just coming from more of the job search side of the world. And is this multi-select? Interesting. Let the model define this. Trust the process.
Yes.
Well, so now we at least know that it's like there's able to do some select some rows from MySQL kind of deal. Don't know if it'll let me do Postgres. Give that a try, just because I know the Postgres interface also should work.
Database polymorphism, so fun.
SSL mode disable. Port 9005. Give it a try. Couldn't connect with these settings.
Do you need to ignore SSL issues?
Probably. Nope. That's not what I wanted. Why did I split it a third time?
Yeah, wait, that's actually an interesting question. So where do you have all this running? This is all running on what, like a mini PC?
Yeah, I've just got it running on a Mac Mini right now.
Okay.
And
it's just Docker, not Kubernetes.
Yeah, just Docker. No Kubernetes. Okay. I used to run like a K3s mini cluster on top of Raspberry Pis. With my work that I was doing in the fall before the election, I repurposed some of those for a fun like edge AI project that I was doing for search and rescue. Couldn't raise money for that, unfortunately.
That is a really cool project, though. We need to feature that in a future episode.
I'm working on a blog post for it. It's got all sorts of really interesting. I should have done like a since like 5 minutes because this has been running for a while. I think since. I also actually think it needs to be up here. It's either since or before, or well, anyway, this is why I tested the MySQL connection first, because I know I can get that one to connect a little bit more reliably.
Yeah.
But either way, it would work if you really wanted to like sit down and invest the effort. You should be able to connect it to Postgres as well. But just as like a means to show like how you can kind of go and like augment existing workflows with data from other sources. All right, so we were talking about getting some information inserted into that database. I really don't want to kick off an AI task right now because I just remember last time it taking, like anytime there was some length of time between like when the AI was doing stuff, it just takes a long time to crawl.
Yeah.
New file. Let's do this real quick again.
Oh, I need to use those file differences more often.
I approve.
Also, I realized we're calling this a podcast, but for anybody that's not watching our screens,
that's very true.
Yeah, it's a vlog, I guess.
Vlog is probably a more apt description.
Live stream, recorded live stream. Yeah, I don't know. You definitely helps to watch the video if you're listening to this.
I'm gonna not bore people with kind of like the output of AI just kind of going crazy. I figured like we can kind of take this opportunity maybe to like chat a little bit, and I can come back to this whenever it's ready.
Definitely. Yeah. So I mean, we're showing a lot of possibilities, but it's not right. Like, I still have that problem of like too many branching possibilities. So how would I focus on the things that are going to be the easiest to achieve and the most useful to me first?
Well, I also think it's like a lot dependent on like your business use case, right? Like, part of where I think a lot of people get stuck is they're like, I'm being told to use this, but I don't quite know where in my product I can kind of get this incorporated well. Where I'm at these days is I'm very much like using it for data exploration and discovery. And so like the more that I can like make it easier for myself to locate information on my day job, like that's a huge win. Even in like the startup side, when it's like, hey, I'm just trying to sit down and like do some market research, figure out what like the possible size of a given segment looks like, figure out what the demographics of that area look like as well. Like all of that is research and data that needs to be like kind of pulled together, aggregated, and understood. And it's a lot of legwork, especially for like a solo startup person. There was some great talks that I went to at Austin Tech Week back in, I want to say that was like end of October, beginning of November last year. It was a week-long conference here in Austin, and they had a lot of like startups, a lot of like investors. You go and you talk to them, and there was a great segment on the rise of kind of this solo founder type of ecosystem, where because tools like AI have made it a little bit easier to kind of have a research assistant without necessarily needing to pay some pretty like larger prices. Well, I don't want to say pretty larger prices. Pay more junior research assistants when like budget's already tight, right? Like I'm thinking back to like I was literally living off of my 401k and unemployment for a few months, and like that was my means of survival, and I didn't really have a lot of like extra money to throw around. And I got a lot of support from close friends and family that like I was very thankful for. But you know, at the end of the day, I'm still very limited in my capacity, and so being able to like ask AI to be like, you know, here's some starting points, kind of go off and do a little bit further research and help me understand what a lot of that looks like. I will say it wasn't until I want to say like MCP really came around that I felt like this started to be a whole lot more effective, right? Like when I think back to the research I was asking AI to do in the fall, you know, it was getting like pretty, I don't want to say janky results back, but it was just not quality, right? Like it's like, this isn't quite true. This is outdated because you're pulling data from, you know, 2023. And at the end of the day, you're just dealing with weights and biases under the hood. And then meanwhile, I want to say it was like earlier this year when I really started getting my hands dirty with MCP that I'm like, oh no, like now I can actually have this thing go off and do some pretty extensive research for me. A great example, Git just turned 20 back in April. I don't remember seeing any announcement about it, right? And so I actually just wrote up a blog post that I'm planning on publishing last week on Git turning 20, but I wanted to kind of go through and do like a full history dive on it. I wanted to pull together a bunch of links and resources. And so I used AI to kind of seed it with, here's some initial links for you to go and follow. Using the information that you get there, kind of like help me pull together a basic outline along with cited sources for each of the kind of data points. So that way, as I'm writing, I can go through and verify and double check and then come back and be like, yeah, like all of this kind of checked out. Like, but it saved me, you know, the real difference is it lets me go out and like watch a movie with my partner when instead of like sitting at home combing through the internet looking for good articles that I can reference and surface, right? Like it gives me more personal time back.
You mentioned combing through the internet, and like yes, that's a tedious thing that it was never fun to do that. But I feel like it also used to actually be more possible. Like it used to, like search results, Google, right? Like let's just talk about it. It's a much shittier experience than it used to be. And I don't know, like I'm sure there are multiple reasons for that, but it seems like Google was my research assistant and the only one that I needed for the most part. If you knew how to use it right? Like I was in school in the era when all of our teachers and professors were teaching us how to use things like Boolean operators in Google searches, and like that was just part of the curriculum of how I learned how to do research.
There was also the days of like, don't use research from Wikipedia, right? Like, and that's still very much true to some extent.
And we had to learn tricks like use Wikipedia to find the primary sources, which is kind of now how we're learning tricks to work with AI. Like use the AI to find the primary sources that it can cite. And so yeah, it does come back to like, to me, the most useful thing we have as data has just like grown to this point where whenever it was a couple like within the last decade where we started putting out like more data every day than in all of human history before the internet, there's just so much. And the most valuable thing to me to keep it all organized is links. linking different pieces of data, linking different things together, and managing those connections, because that's the only way to keep track of anything, is if it's linked to something else that you're tracking.
I got a first pass done, but I needed to do a little bit more on the.
All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look.
Oh no, I'm not ready for it yet.
Okay.
I will show it though, because I'd actually just used the fetch API.
All right, let's see it.
So you can see it's going through and doing a fetch, and it'll convert the markdown, the HTML to markdown, so that way when it's actually being pulled into the AI context, is able to better understand the content, because the way you end up with a lot of hallucinations is when you see like repeated HTML tags, right? Because it can't discern that that's an HTML tag and just thinks it's part of the content. And so Markdown is actually particularly effective for this, where we can actually go and suss a lot of that out, because the components in Markdown end up getting stripped out in the tokenization process, right? Like think back to the early Lucene days when you would take a string and tokenize it, right? You would usually skip over characters that didn't have semantic meaning. And so you would quite often just stick to the more popular ones that you would work with and use. And so by removing kind of a lot of the excess HTML tags and just going straight to Markdown, it actually gets a lot more effective at being able to take that remote content, digest it, understand it, and actually put it into effect. I also realized I never kind of did a formal overview of kind of this Klein window here, which is a big reason I still like using Klein.
Yeah, this is very effective. I'm impressed.
So Klein, the big reason I really like using Klein is it gives you like kind of a live cost explorer in the upper right of the tab. So you can see kind of a running total of how much you've spent so far on a given task. The other things that you can see is kind of like the up and down on the token side of the world, right? How many tokens are you sending up? How many are you downloading? Typically, you're usually uploading fewer than you're downloading. Sometimes that'll peak up higher when you're like sending it really large documents. The cache is also really important. This kind of tells you, how effective you're making reuse of information you've already processed. And then this last bit here is actually the context window. And the thing that I really like about the context window is you can tell like when you're getting close to the maximum size for that model. And when you reach that maximum size, you end up flushing. And so can't tell you how many times I've gone down on like an implementation and I've like overflown this buffer 3 or 4 times. That's really important because information earlier in the context is purged from the buffer when that has to happen. And so the more recent information takes precedent over the older information. And so if there was something that you kind of prompted it with like super early on and then your context window shifts, it's no longer remembering that early context window prompts, right?
And does it have some kind of like instructions file that you can give it that it'll keep referring back to?
A friend of mine wrote this project called .context, which is really, really useful. There's also an MCP server for it, but you can prime it with like a rule that says like, if this .context directory exists, go read that first. I've taken to actually not including that in all of my prompts. For one reason or another, like there's times where I don't necessarily need all of the context that kind of comes along with that. A good example of this is actually in like my app tracks project. I actually do use the .context directory, and this is kind of where I have my repository pattern documented. So if I need to implement a database access pattern, like AI knows to look in .context and then look at this file to reference, like how do I actually go and update this accordingly. I've got kind of similar diagrams in place for being able to like have mermaid diagrams that represent the overall architecture. You can actually see this kind of like when I go and pull up the README to be able to see how everything relates to one another. But this is all information that Klein understands how to process from that perspective. Did I close out of the window? Wow. Good job, Mya. Fucking good job. where were we here? I mean, it seems like it got pretty far along the way. I wanted a little bit more, I think, on the actual design side, because it's doing a lot of like demographic and economic data. Like all this stuff is like super useful.
Mhm.
Actually, and it looks like they're using Go. And I don't know how they landed on Go as the technical decision.
It is the default. The AI has decided. Our entire backend is a 5-line Go function.
What was that?
From the there was a Programmers Are Also Human video this week that was the interview with senior DevOps engineer. For anyone who hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it. We'll link it in the notes. It was hilarious. But yeah, one of the quotes from it was like, we used to have all this big infrastructure, big. Now our entire backend is a 5-line Go function, but somehow we're still paying more.
That doesn't surprise me. We're 9 minutes till the end, so
Yeah,
I
we
just
are.
kind of wanted to time check that.
Oh,
I think
you just
part of
also
where I want to like
go ahead.
part of where I want to like close on this, right, is like, even though we didn't get a one-off, like even though we didn't get to the like one-off portion of this, where it's like, right, like it's easy to like use this to write one-off tools that can just be scheduled in the background, like pulling information from an API to snapshot into your database is like a very common task for people being able to do any kind of market research or anything like that, right? Like they want to be able to explore it in their tool of choice.
Yeah.
And you would have to sit down and write these tools quite often, like manually by hand. It'd take you like a day or so, maybe two, to like knock out if you're really going deep on it.
Are you able to show
now,
the music app that you built? Because like an hour, it's ambitious
yeah.
to build one in that time, but we can show off the one that you already built.
I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah.
Let me see.
One thing
So
I do
back
like
here.
about these workflows is it does feel, for me, it's a little bit easier. I'm not needing to get as deep into the context, into the zone, as it were, to program. So I'm able to get farther if I'm going to be distracted anyways. If I'm on a layover in an airport, right, and I only have an hour and I don't really have time to like put my headphones on and totally zone out, I can record, right? Like I can get to the point of like making some Git commits that are useful, even if I don't complete the whole task, which is nice.
So this is a game I entirely vibe coded, right? Like the idea was very simple. I started my first set of piano lessons back in June. Growing up, I learned viola, so I learned how to read the alto clef. I never learned how to read the bass clef or the treble clef.
Shame. Sorry, I'm just kidding for anyone who doesn't know me.
Sorry. And so I was like, I wanted to build a tool that would help me learn how to read sheet music a little bit quickly, right? And so first lesson was like, we sat down and did this. And then second lesson was like, okay, like here's a little bit more to kind of build on. But I'm like, I could easily take this and build this into like, an actual application that I can then use and like play around with. And I'm like, I can probably do this with all with AI, right? Like just out of curiosity. And so I sat down and I had it create a simple README that kind of outlined all of the technical details about it, issues with kind of like this, like the staff renderer and like making sure everything kind of aligns properly. We talk about, I wanted to have different levels of difficulty in, so like it breaks out words, whether or not they're like 5 or more, 4 to 6 letters, or if they're 3 or 4 letter words. So you can actually kind of progress through that way. I don't think it really did a good job of tracking like everything that it actually implemented, because I'm pretty sure it implemented the vast majority of these components. They just used a simple HTTP server, which I was more than fine with, because then it was just a matter of taking this like HTML, like this is published as a GitHub Pages URL, right? So anybody can go pull this up and play around with it.
Sure.
I can select.
And I'm sure if you ask for a Docker, file, you'd have one in 30 seconds.
Yeah, but there's no point in it, right? Just throw it on an
Right.
S3 bucket and call it a day.
Sorry. I just love Docker too much. Sorry.
Yeah, it's hard not to like containers like really did help a lot, you know, for coming from the world of virtualization. I know some people that will probably fight me on that bit, but anyway, you can kind of pick out a whole bunch of different things. There's cases where it's kind of like overflowing here, so you can tell that there's like still a lot of rough edges when it comes to the actual implementation. But you know, sitting down and just trying to piece some of this together. What is this? CAB? No.
No idea. But this is such an awesome use of AI, like to build a learning tool like this. I love it. This is perhaps one of the best uses of AI that I have seen.
So this is CAB, right?
Yeah, you're building I+1 learning for yourself.
Yeah, so I can just like keep going, go new word, right, and just kind of keep going. It's gonna be really embarrassing because I'm still not fast with it, but I can still play some pretty impressive songs. You can tell here there's overlap, right? So
your score is 14 out of 1, so there are some bugs.
So your score is 14. You've got 1 correct out of 1 correct question.
Okay. Your
streak is I still get 2, and part of that is because of the way ELO works. Are you familiar with the ELO ranking algorithm? It's used in things like chess.
Okay. Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so it's done based on your number of wins, and then some. I think it encapsulates like Fibonacci or something like that. Anyway, there's certain ways you adjust your score accordingly. If you're using a new word, if you win or you lose, kind of deal. I think they also have a case for draw. So, but yeah, so G, E, F, A. Brain is just not firing right now.
gotta spend some more time practicing.
F. What's the word? Gaff.
Yeah. What a gaff. So
yeah,
closing thoughts, like, yeah, what else should people use this for? What should people keep in mind when going down building these workflows?
I do think like people I don't know. I do think there's a lot of well-deserved hate on it in kind of like social atmospheres. I do think like there's some really nascent use cases for it. I have had like numerous conversations with like engineering leaders about kind of like the pace of AI outpacing our ability to learn new skills and tools, right? Like if suppose the claim of AI is taking our jobs or taking everybody's jobs is true. Suppose that's true, right? And our response to that is go learn something new. Okay, well, if AI can learn it faster than me, then I can't stay on top of that curve in order to keep myself relevant in industry or keep my job under my feet, right? Like there's some radical social changes that need to occur if we really ever want to get to that world, but people just seem very unwilling to even have those conversations today. But I think like when it comes to like personal development, don't be afraid to like use it and explore around with it. There's definitely a trade-off to like when you're using it to write code, make sure you understand the code that it's writing before just kind of saying like push button go and this looks good to me, like let's merge it kind of deal, because there's a few well-known cases of it now at this point where people have used AI to build a product and then it starts crashing in production and they don't know how to troubleshoot it and solve it, right? Like there's a lot of issues like that where if you're not aware of the way it's working with your ecosystem, you're kind of just you're gonna be left out hung to dry eventually. So know what it's doing, understand what it's producing. It's a great way to kind of learn that way.
I feel like there's a momentum aspect too, right? Like with DevOps, there's a momentum in like the more mature you get, the more you automate things, and if you're following good practices, right, the more your code base sort of grows and the patterns that are available to you grow, and you can kind of increase your productivity and increase your speed because you have sort of this base of automations. It's also possible to like automate yourself into pain using some of those same tools. But right, like done correctly, you're just building on top of it, and it feels like that's now necessary for us to have that same sort of momentum in our personal knowledge base, in our personal information consumption and production, whatever the whatever our role is. Yeah, so it can be hard. Like I'm staring at a blank Nathan instance with nothing in it, and that's challenging. But at least I have my Obsidian Vault that's fairly organized. We're going to talk a little bit more about like the text base, like you mentioned Markdown, which we love Markdown, and like I'm of the philosophy that anything that I can commit to get that is mixed configurations, which we're going to talk about in episode 5, and Markdown, that's what I want my whole life to be, and then maybe something like base row for a database. But even that, I'd love to be able to export to simple Markdown.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of like our episode. It's not next week, but it's in a couple of weeks. Next week, we're going to be off for a quick break from what I remember on our scheduling. But we're going to be talking about specifically, what was it? I think it was like agent
making these into agents. So having agents that we can chat with based on these workflows.
But I also remember kind of there being a specific like MCP component to it. And I think MCP is probably one worth, diving in deep on in and of itself, because that's really where you're able to kind of like make the most effective use of some of the larger scale models while also kind of keeping information, closed off to some extent. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Me too. I think that's maybe a great place to stop, right? If you're watching this live, thanks. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the other one that I'm really looking forward to is the next one.
That's what I was alluding to. Yeah.
Yeah. That one I think is going to be really useful. So
that's episode 5, I think, which is going to be in like 6 weeks.
4
weeks. Oh, right.
Episode 4 on the 15th.
It'll all be in the description. It'll all be in post-production. If you're watching this live, thanks so much. If you're watching the recording, be sure to subscribe to get our next 4 episodes that we have remaining. And I guess we'll see you in a couple weeks.
See you in a couple weeks, y'all.